why did these teachers become teachers? Was it to become rich?
No, that's not the way to
No,
become rich. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
they did this because this is the job they wanted to do. They love this. Why would anybody do a job they love to do and get burnt out from it?
Hi, this is Shubham Tiwari, and I welcome you to Changemakers, a show brought to you by Wonderslate Technologies, where we bring to you the faces that are changing the face of innovation, education, and leadership all over the world. Today's guest is a synthesis modeler, a teacher, trainer, and consultant at Flowsys, among many other things. We'll ask him about those things. So, Mr. John Lenhart, welcome to Wonder Publish Magazine.
Well, thank you for having me. And I love all three of those topics. So it'll be interesting to see which way we go here.
Yes, we are so great to have you, sir. So, but first of all, to clear, things for our audience, please tell us about your, journey, because you have such a vast experience. You know everything about business. You have been in sales, marketing, now in training. So please talk about your journey as well as how you ended up with Flowsys.
Right. So it is a long story. The shortest version I'll have is that I went to school to be a chemical engineer and a chemist. And I worked for 4 consumer products companies making new and improved products, sometimes even inventing products. One of the companies I was at, I'm the youngest inventor of the year in the history of that chemical company. I invented a chemical that co-invented that is infinitely soluble in water and infinitely soluble in oil. So it's can get in anything type of thing. One of the companies I was at, we made an air freshener that plugged into the wall. It worked for 45 days, but people said they can only smell it for 21. And I found out I was more a modeler than anything. I like to create models to explain everything. And that's how I got my projects done on time. That's how I made these formulations. They asked me to model out why this happened. And I found out that how our nose and our brain are connected. An animal doesn't have this issue. And the issue is what's called habituation. So 21 minutes after you walk into a room, you can't smell the room anymore. That's called adaptation. Wow. 21 days after walking into the same room, you can't smell that room anymore. It's called habituation. Animals don't have this issue, but we humans do. It took about 11 models, and then I found out why this happens. And it has to do with our unconscious brain zeroing out the background, actually, so we can think better and have discussions. If we had an animal, we would constantly be thinking about every smell we're experiencing, and we would be able to have these conversations.
Correct.
So when I found out about that, I realized that everybody's model for the brain is wrong. Now, this is 26 years ago. And basically the way this graph works is the first 5 days you learn the fragrance. So every day you experience the fragrance, it appears to get stronger, but you're actually learning it and focusing in on it. So the fragrance is the same, but you're learning it, it appears to get stronger. Then when you've mastered the fragrance after about 5 or 6 days, your brain zeroes it out over the next 15, 16 days, and you can't smell anymore. I found out your brain does that with everything. It does that with your friends. It does that with, it's scary. It does that with romantic love. It does that with medications. Yeah. This is how people get addicted to drugs, and they need more and more to get the same effect. It does this with your accomplishments. You accomplish something and you feel great, and you accomplish it again and you're like,
inadequate again. Yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So your brain is actively doing that. Now, as an engineer, when you look at this chart, there's only one day that your brain fully experienced reality with that fragrance. Think about that for a second. You had this fragrance 45 days. Yeah. And one day you fully experienced reality. Every other day you did not fully experience reality. And as an engineer, when I looked at that 26 years ago, I had to come to one conclusion. Our brain is not made to fully experience reality. It's a poor construction for that. However, when you look at happiness, those first 5 days, you're happy every day. You're happy the first day you smell that fragrance. You're happy the second day because it seems to be getting stronger. You're happy every day. And then the day after you experience it and fully, experience it, it comes down to 90% and you're 90% happy. Then it comes down and you're a little less happy. And then when it goes down, you're upset. In your brain, two is a pattern. Anytime two things happen, your
Yep.
brain assumes the third is going to happen and you're no longer happy. So if you think about it, our brains were made to be happy. And if we can keep our brains in the learning phase, because that's really what that is. The first 5 days is your brain is learning the fragrance. So you stay happy if we can stay in the learning phase. So when I tell people, I'll jump all the way to marriage for a second.
Yeah.
When I tell people who are married, I say, if you learn something every day about your spouse that you didn't know,
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have predicted, your brain will remap your spouse and keep you happy. The minute you go, oh, I fully know my friend, I fully know my spouse, your brain goes, okay, well, I'll take away the emotion. You know, I'm feeling happy. So the key is to
yeah.
stay in the learning phase.
So don't overtext your prospective partner. I mean, they should not know, everything about you at once.
Well, the thing, right? That's a good point. Is
Yeah.
you want to continue to grow in that. The other thing is we all experience stuff every day. So
Yeah.
there's no way my wife can completely know me, because tomorrow
Correct.
I'm going to learn something new. But if I share that with her, and that's the thing. So when this happened, I suddenly realized everybody's got the wrong model for the brain. Everybody thinks we're a robot. Our brain is all logical, and we're supposed to do, the more reality we can experience and understand, the happier we're going to be. And actually your brain fights that. The more you experience reality, the quicker your brain goes to remove it. So I started coming up with a model for the mind and the brain kind of in my spare time. And it took 10 years, and it was like a wiring diagram. Had like 100 lines in it, and everything was on one sheet of paper. And I had 3 psychology students from 3 universities learning from me, learning about this. I was kind of teaching, and I was trying to interact with them, help them teach me things, because I wanted to make this model better. And one of those students wanted to present this information at their seminar. And so the teacher wanted to meet with me. So I went to see this professor, and I handed him my model for the mind and the brain on one sheet of paper, like a wiring diagram. I handed it to him. And he takes it and he looks at it for about 5 minutes. I just sat in his office and he's looking at it. And then he finally goes, okay, I got 2 things to say. Number one, he goes, there's nothing on this sheet of paper we don't know. Because I had all the parts of the brain, identified, labeled. He goes, there's nothing on here we don't know. He goes, but I've never seen it on one sheet of paper.
Wow.
This is not how we do science. He goes, we look at discrete parts of the brain, and then we say stuff out here happens that damage it, and then our behavior. You are saying there's these thought processes, these programs, essentially 4 circuits in the brain that come out with 4 different thought processes. He goes, second thing I would tell you is you're wrong. Stop doing this. Stop working on this. This is the wrong thing. Well, I didn't listen to him. And I used that information. Well, I use that information to help people get off antidepressants, get off bipolar medication. I help people be happy. 15 years ago, when I had that meeting with the professor, I used to love to ask students, ask your professor how to be happy. And they would always come back. 15 years ago, every psychology professor would say this: it's not our job to help people be happy. It's our job to help people stop doing bad behavior. Now, in the last 7-8 years, there's been this whole field of happiness. Now psychology is now interested in helping people be happy. But that's the thing. When I realized I had this model and I could help people, I decided I'm going to spend more time with my flow sets. And one of the things I'll tell you, there's all these hacks. When you understand how the brain actually works, you can have all these hacks. So I'll say to people, guys want to grow in attraction to their wife. They think their wife's attractive. But they want to see her as more attractive. And I like to say, how would you tell him to see her as more attractive? Mark Twain said, stare at ugly women. Well, that's a whole different way of doing it. But the thing that most people say is they tell the guy, tell yourself she's the most beautiful woman in the world. I wouldn't be anywhere without her. They think you are a conscious brain. Your sexual attractions in your unconscious. Your unconscious has all your behavior and all your energy. So what you need to do is get your unconscious to that. If a guy shares something with his wife that he's never shared out loud, his unconscious wants to know that, because your unconscious doesn't know what you're thinking until you say it out loud or write it down. So when you share that with her, your unconscious goes, hey, I wanted to know that. I know it because of her. I'm going to drive you towards her and it will energize you towards her. And it's real simple to do. I tell my wife everything first, then
Yeah,
I'll tell it to my friends
of
because
course.
I'm
Yeah,
intentionally getting my unconscious to drive me to my wife, and I
correct.
constantly grow in traction to her.
That's
So
a good point. Yeah,
so when you understand how the brain actually works, all of a sudden, all these little hacks occur. And a lot of this I wanted to apply to education. So the last part of the story is in 2015, there was an article, there was this magazine, this neuroscience magazine. And in it, the editor said, the biggest thing we learned in 2015 is that instead of looking at discrete parts of the brain for behavior, we should be looking at neural circuits, which is what I told that psychology professor.
wow.
So I hadn't shared this information publicly because I looked insane, because I was doing the opposite of medical science. I took that to my wife. I said, hey, can we now share this publicly? And the first place I wanted to share it was in the education system,
Right.
because I really believe this information helps the teachers with the kids' behavior,
Yeah.
and it helps the teachers help the kids learn 3 times faster.
Right. It's amazing. Amazing. And I mean, your, passion is quite, visible when we see you talk about this. And you left a very, again, very passionate comment on a post which I shared about, teacher well-being, how they are constantly, they're feeling exhausted all the time, not being, asked about how your day is going on and all. So, but before, I mean, I would come to that later. So in a way, human brain is seeking novelty, right? Because we want new information in a meaningful way or systematic way. So does this also apply to models? Because you're big on models, right? So do we also need newer models all the time, or or there are specific set of basic models which are running through generations?
Well, I'm going to say yes to both. So
Okay.
a model is never finished. Even when I think I have the model,
Wow.
I want to stress it. It's called being contrastive. I want to consider that I could be wrong, and I want to intentionally try to wreck the model. Science is really not about doing things to confirm your point.
Correct.
Science is about having a model and then doing a test to intentionally try to wreck your model. So we always need to improve the models, but there are only 4 types of models. So I teach this through the story of scurvy. I like to say, and I teach this to executives to have a shortcut, because executives have all this information come at them.
Yeah.
And I show them that everything everybody says fits in one of 4 models, and I'll show you how to respond to each. So if you think about it, I'm going to do a quick version of the story of scurvy.
Sure.
2 million Europeans died of scurvy, I think between 1400 and 1700. And the original thought of scurvy, the first model is it's causeless, unknown forces.
Divine
basically, we didn't pray enough. We don't know why.
Correct.
We died. So when people say, hey, it is what it is, hey, it's just random, that's one type of model.
Yeah.
And that actually damages your brain. And what I normally tell people is to say to them, would you take that answer from your doctor or your mechanic if they gave that to you?
Of course not. Yeah.
No. So the first type of model is causeless. The second type of model is people started realizing that scurvy had something to do with your diet. So they started saying, eat well. Well, that's just stating an effect. And on these forums and on social media like LinkedIn and Facebook, get these people who do eat well. Hey, stop being stressed out.
Yeah.
First of all, your brain can't do a don't. If you tell someone don't do something, they're 3 times more likely to do it. If you see someone walking over a rug and you say don't trip, they're now 3 times more likely to trip.
Wow.
You want to say be careful or lift your feet. But these people will say don't stress out. And I like to say, do you think you helped anybody? Because then I'll say this, I'll say, be smart, be nice, and be a leader. That'll be $50. I helped you, right?
Yeah.
No, I just
in the age of social media, it's yes.
Oh, this is all of social media. It drives me nuts. Because people go, I got to do something.
Yeah,
I got to fix the world. I got to help the world. Stop being racist.
How do you do that?
And actually, you made the person 3 times more racist when you said it.
Correct.
So it's like, but that's social media.
Yeah.
So that's the second type of model, state and effect. The third type of model is to look at the tangible causes. So they started, people go, what's the problem with scurvy? You just have citrus. Well, they were eating limes. They got rid of the scurvy. They
Yep.
concentrated up the lime juice and they no longer got rid of scurvy. Another thing that happened that people don't realize about the story of scurvy is that Eskimos don't get scurvy. They don't have any
Really
citrus.
nice. Okay.
A guy locked himself up in a New York hospital for 1 year and all he did was eat meat and he didn't get scurvy. So at the time, people actually didn't believe that citrus removed scurvy because meat was removing scurvy. So the model became fresh meat and citrus because what they believed was there was an impurity of meat called ptomaine. So they believed if you ate fresh meat, like the Eskimos, you wouldn't get scurvy. And then if the meat wasn't fresh and you had citrus, the acid would kill the ptomaine, so you didn't get scurvy. So that's what I call a contextual application. They're talking about specific meat and citrus. They're not talking about the overall principle. They're talking about what works in that context.
Yeah.
And so that's how you solve a problem. The problem is that not all fresh meat does that, not all citrus. And so people still die. The fourth model is what I call a vitamin C model. It's the intangible cause. Hexuronic acid was discovered, and it wasn't until the 1950s and 1960s that scurvy was eradicated with vitamin C. Now notice, when you have a vitamin C model, two things happen. So to your point about, are there models that, I love the second part of your question, are there models that stay with us forever? A vitamin C model will stay with us forever. And here's the benefit of having a vitamin C model. First of all, you can figure out, you can solve any problem regardless of the context. You just take vitamin C, it doesn't matter because it explains everything that happened. Lime juice has vitamin C, but when you concentrate it up, it loses it. The thing is horse meat and organ meat. So an Eskimo kills a seal and he gives the heart to his wife. Why? Because it's got all this vitamin C in organ meat.
Okay.
So if you understand about vitamin C, all of a sudden, all the contexts that ever worked in the past, you can explain those. You also can figure out the ultimate solution. Honey has vitamin C and honey has an indefinite shelf life. If they had taken honey on those ships, no one would have ever had to die. Second of all, when you have a vitamin C model, you know who's killing people. You know for sure when this person gives this food, you look at it before they eat it and go, you're going to die. So I try to come up with vitamin C models. An example of a vitamin C model, I'm a chemist and an engineer. Bohr's model for the atom. All of chemistry is built on this simple model, okay? That, there's neutrons and protons that are in the nucleus of atom that make up most of its weight, and electrons circulate the atom. One sentence, and that's the whole model.
Is the chemistry.
So what I like to say to psychologists and doctors is, what's your model for the mind and the brain?
They will have a problem answering that.
There's no model. And I have a model. This is what I call my vitamin C model for the mind and brain. Everything's built off of this. You are a driver in a car. You, the mind, that's who you are. You are an intangible person. You are the mind and your brain is the car. Now, if you think about it, when you drive a car, you're only in control, direct control of 10% of that car. The gas pedal, steering wheel, brake, that's it. You are only in control of 10% of your brain directly. That's your conscious brain. 90% of your car is where all the behavior is, where all the energy is. 90% of your brain, your unconscious, is where all your behavior and your energy is. So you, a mind, use your conscious brain to lead your unconscious. The problem is all these models that are out there, whether they realize it or not, believe that you use your conscious brain to do everything. That would be like me ripping a steering wheel out of a car, taping a gas pedal to one foot, a brake pedal to the other foot, and walking around the parking lot going, hey, I'm driving.
Like Mr. Bean, who's sitting on top of his car.
Right. You'll make it out of the parking lot, but you won't make it across country. If you believe this about your conscious brain, you'll make it through projects, but you're never going to make it through your life. You're going to get worn out. And so that's the thing is the car and driver model explains everything. And everything goes from that.
I think most of the people, don't want to, accept that there are models, I mean, basic models in life to follow, because it requires, that much of letting go, right? You can't be in control of everything. So
But
that's
that's
great.
why I say when I explain those four
Yeah.
models,
Yeah.
now what I've done is unconsciously, because the way you reach people is unconsciously, and the way you change behavior is unconsciously. You
Yeah.
don't change it consciously.
Yeah.
If someone tells you what to do you it? No.
No.
But
Yeah.
unconsciously, when I tell that four models, what I just said unconsciously to all your viewers is every explanation you have for everything is a model. It's one of these four. The first three will always be contradictory.
Yeah.
The vitamin C model is the only model we should be striving for. And there are very, very few vitamin C models in this world. That's why the world is going backwards. We have a lot of what you said, like on social media, we have a lot of eat well models.
Correct.
And we think the best models are fresh meat and citrus, and they're not.
Right. That's wonderful. And the nomenclature I really like, vitamin C model. That's wonderful. So now coming back to the question of, education, we see, when it comes to well-being, when it comes to mental health, a lot of that space is covered by students. We are constantly thinking about age groups, in what ways we can help, about in which country you are. It also depends upon that. And most of the limelight, for the lack of a better word, is, usually garnered by the principals or the management people. Nobody really, cares about the educators in between, the teachers. They're supposed to be, omnipresent everywhere, ever present. So, I mean, talk about this, model which you have created, instant impact, which is very, helpful, because I've seen many people talk about it on LinkedIn as well.
Right. So your question actually applies to everything you just said at the very start, because first of all, you have these administrators,
Yeah.
and they're not leaders. So
it's important.
Mental health begins in definitions. The way your brain works is you have a definition for every word, whether you realize it or not. And your ability to get a vitamin C model depends on having the right definition. So let me start with leaders, because I'm very passionate about leadership.
Yeah.
I'll ask people, what's your definition of leader? And the definition of leader is one who facilitates the purpose and progress of another.
Wow. Okay.
And all the effects. So when people talk about servant leadership, what's non-servant leadership? So that's using the term servant leadership is actually damaging to your brain, because the servant is an effect. And you're trying to put it in your brain as a cause, and you're actually damaging your brain, like unconditional love or half truth. There's a bunch of these words we use because we don't have the right definition. A boss facilitates their own purpose and progress at the expense of another. So the first issue we have is we have bosses who are administrators in schools. They're not facilitating the teachers.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the teachers, I like to say they are the best for caring for the students, and no one's caring for the teachers.
True.
So really, instant impact is meant to care for the teachers. And the thing is if you think about this, why did these teachers become teachers? Was it to become rich?
No, that's not the way to become rich. Yeah.
No, they did this because this is the job they wanted to do. They love this. Why would anybody do a job they love to do and get burnt out from it?
Because they love it, because they're passionate about teaching, right?
Right, but why do they get burnt out? Why aren't they gaining energy every day? And the reason is that they don't have the tools to do it right. When we help people with instant impact, these teachers, they don't want the school year to end. They don't even want to go on any of the vacations, because they're afraid they're not going to get as much energy on vacation as they do at work, really.
Yeah.
So what we do is we help the teachers understand how to be their mind, their driver in a car,
right,
towards the kids. And that's what I do in every area. I help leaders be themselves to everybody. If I was to take you and teach you how to be a leader, and I was going to take someone else, I wouldn't teach you the same stuff.
Right.
Because you're different leaders. It's going to look different coming out of you, but the vitamin C behind it's going to be the same. So what we're doing is we're helping these teachers have this vitamin C in them, and then how they teach might be different than somebody else, but they're teaching in a way that gives them energy. And so much of what these teachers are being told to do is teach in a way that operates opposite of themselves. It would be like you driving a car that you're not fit for. If you're a race car driver and I make you drive a truck, you're going to get drained all day. So that's
Correct.
what I do is I help people, the type of driver they are, I help them use their car, their brain to deliver the same effect, and it gives them energy. And when a teacher has energy,
Yeah.
that's the number one thing, the number one tool to help the kids. If the teacher is down and says all the right information, the kids sink in because we're human to them being down. When a teacher is up, when a teacher has energy, it almost doesn't matter what the teacher says. The kids are right there and they want to be there. So
Yeah.
we're humans, we're not robots. Everything we're doing is back to this conscious brain model. The
Correct.
model for the brain is it's all logical. Teachers need to be all logical, and they get worn out because they're humans, and the kids don't learn because they're humans, and everything falls apart. If the
True.
teacher acts as a human, it reaches the kid as a human, and everybody has more energy, and the effect is they learn more. So I like to say it this way. You can try to teach that kid the information, and they're going to fight it, and they're going to lose energy. You can try to get to know the kid and connect with them, and the effect is they're going to learn all the information more quickly.
Amazing, amazing. And what are some of the major problems, or let's say the common problems that teachers across countries are facing, and how do you transcend those cultural boundaries as well as linguistic boundaries to understand the real problems?
The biggest one is that our brain is made for stories.
Correct.
So a story has three parts. You introduce the characters,
Yep.
introduce the conflict, resolve the conflict. If you think about it, a joke is the simplest form of a story. The setup is you introduce the character's conflict, and then the punchline is the resolution.
Yeah.
So when we teach kids directly, they at most learn 25% of information. So if you think about it, if I were to tell you the capital of a certain country,
Yeah.
you would have to repeat it 3 times in hopes you'd get it. That's proof you only got it 25%. So we are not robots or computers. We don't learn information directly. If I tell you information directly,
Yeah.
you are not going to get it. Now, the smartest kids get it. So what's the point of school? Is the point of school to sort out who's the smartest and who's the dumbest?
Yeah.
But that's the way school's set up.
Yeah.
We say information, and we want the kids, and we want to see who learned it, who didn't. If school was truly about everybody learning, then we would do 2 things. Number 1, we would teach in stories. And number 2, we would have the kids teach each other. When you teach information, you learn 75% of it. So what we do with these kids learn the information 3 times faster. We give them information, and then we teach it. So if you imagine 4 kids sitting at a table together, and they have a list of math problems, and they each know, I'm going to do 1, you're going to do 2, you're going to do 3, you're going to do 4. We do the problems, and then when we're all done, I now share with you my answer with 1. I teach you 1, and you can question me. Next person teaches 2, teaches 3. Now here's a side effect. When we get face-to-face with people, our body kicks out dopamine, and dopamine facilitates learning. So what's happening, if you think about this model, I sat here and learned. Then when I taught it, I learned it more, and I got dopamine, which means I really got it. And then I turned and we do the next 4 problems. These kids learn stuff 3 times faster.
Wow.
Behavior, because all of teaching is this. I'm trying to get information to the kids, and I'm trying to deal with their behavior.
Yeah.
You deal with behavior in stories. And so one of the classic, anybody who's had kids will tell you this story. I told my kid, don't stand on that chair. And you know what they did?
They stood on it.
They got right up on the chair, and they looked at me, and they mocked me. They smiled and mocked me. And I go, now think about this for a second. Because here I go, do you want to know what's going on in their brain for real? Because you think they're a robot. Don't sit on the chair, they're not going to sit on the chair. And then my unconscious confrontations, I say, if I tell you not to do something, will you not do it? And they're like, well, okay. Number 1, you can't do a don't. When you tell them don't do that, they're 3 times more likely to do it. Second of all, don't stand on the chair. How much of a story was that? 1 part.
Just 1 part, yeah.
It's a character. Because here's the conflict. So what happens is everybody's brain instantly fills in the rest of the story. We all do it. Our brains automatically do it because our brain works in stories.
Yeah.
So that kid looks at that chair and goes, what's the problem if I stand on that chair and what's going to happen?
He wants to
I
resolve
know.
that story. Yeah, correct.
The problem is you don't think I can do it. And you'll be amazed when I do it. And they go up on that chair and they look at you going, aren't you amazed? And you go, they're cocky. They're taunting me.
Yeah,
You know why I kid stood in the chair? Because you said don't stand in the chair and you gave them one part of the story. If you say, if you want to get in trouble, stand on the chair, they will never stand on the chair. That's the thing, is if you understand how the brain actually works, then the way you communicate is you'll get the whole kid and the behaviors dissolve.
correct.
We are actually causing the behaviors. The teacher, and this is hard for people to hear, the teacher's causing behavior. I will tell you a quick story, and this goes to leadership.
Yeah, sure.
We have a thing in the United States, seclusions and restraints. I don't know if they measure this all over the world, but if you put your hand on a kid, that's called a restraint. The kid misbehaves, you high talk to him, then he misbehaves, and you grab him, that's
Yeah.
called a restraint.
Hmm.
You stick him in a room by himself, that's a seclusion.
Yeah.
Right? There was a kid who had 88 seclusions and restraints the first 3 months of school. He was
88.
averaging more than one a day.
One a
88.
day. Yeah.
Averaging more than one a day. And the teacher had all the training that all the teachers get on how to deal with kids. They moved that kid to a teacher who had our training.
Yeah.
In the next 6 months, guess how many seclusions and restraints that kid had?
Number must have reduced. 0. Wow.
Zero, 0. Who was causing the seclusions and restraints?
The teacher.
Teacher. And they don't want to. That's the thing, is these teachers don't want to do it, but they're doing it. Now, when that number got shared, a superintendent, the head administrator at another school, threatened this school if they ever released that information. Now think about that. And this is the problem. So I'm going to jump to leadership real quick. Here's the number one problem we have with leaders. A leader would rather everybody suffer than they say, hey, I was wrong.
That's true across cultures. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And what does that teach all of us? Whatever all our leaders are teaching us is don't ever admit you're wrong. And then we teach it to the kids. And then the teachers are mad that kids won't admit they're wrong. But do the teachers admit they're wrong? Do the administrators admit they're wrong? That's the thing, is that this information could literally change the world, but people would have to admit what we were doing is wrong. And that's your issue with your second topic, creativity.
Yeah.
You know, I was an inventor. When I came up with the model for how the nose and the brain were connected, it got declared 26 years ago, it got declared a trade secret. I was prevented from talking to any expert in the world about this information.
Yeah.
So I like to say to people, you know, people like to say, I want to be an inventor. And I always say, when you invent something, how many people in the world understand what you invented?
Just you.
Do you know what that feels like? Do you know what it actually feels like?
Loneliness.
And people hate you.
Yeah.
Whenever you're creative, whenever you come up with a new idea,
you're challenging their
everybody
ideas.
thinks it's their job to hate you.
Correct.
Do you really want to be an inventor? You don't really want to be.
You have to pay a big price. Yeah, of course.
You do. So that's the problem. So what hinders creativity? You're the only person in the world who understands it, and everybody thinks it's their job to hate the new idea. So that's why we don't have creativity.
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking about your role and, you know, the kind of problems you solve, what kind of misconceptions, you know, people have about you and your job? Because I'm asking this question to, because if there is an educator, a teacher who's, you know, watching this, he should not be, you know, thinking like, oh, no, my case is different. This person doesn't know me. What kind of things they may be having in their mind?
Right. I think the biggest issue is because I'm a vitamin C, I'm not fresh meat and citrus. All the training the teachers have gotten is vitamin C and citrus. So what I like to say to the teachers is, first of all, your experience is valid. I am never going to tell you you're wrong about your experience. The second thing is, I am not going to teach you how to teach. Every training you got, they teach you how to teach. I'm not.
Correct.
So you're like, what are you going to do? And so the best way I can explain it is this. If dealing with an issue is 10 steps, you already have steps 3 through 10. I'm going to give you step 1 and 2, because everybody, when they go to solve a problem, they have all these experience, all these tools, and they're in piles.
Yeah.
So when you go to solve a problem, you look at a pile, you pick a tool, you use it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I am going to build you a wall storage unit. I'm going to take all your tools and put it in this wall storage unit. And then I'm going to teach you step 1 and 2. So every situation, if you take I like to say, take a step back before you rush forward in step 3,
Yeah.
take a step back. You do step 1, step 2, then you go to the section of your wall storage unit that applies, and you're going to see a bunch of your tools there. Pick any one of your tools you want to pick, and it will work every time. And that's the thing is when I all I do is teach people how the mind and brain works. And when I do that, these teachers go, I already did do that. And I like to say this, everybody in the world is doing everything in your brain. I'll say it this way. There are no 0 events to your brain. Everything you do and say and think either helps your brain or hurts your brain. There is no 0 event. And most people are doing 51% helpful things and 49% hurtful things. When I teach them the mind and the brain, they go, hey, I already do this. But I already do this too.
Yeah. You're dragging so much weight.
Yeah. This, they go.
So you reduce that additional baggage. Yeah. Correct.
Right. So now they know, they don't know this is hurting. They thought this is helping. That's hurting. I'll stop it. This is helping. I didn't even know that was helping. I didn't even know I did. I didn't know I told stories. You tell stories all the time to deal with behavior. Do it on purpose. You're right. Because I'll say to people, tell me an example of when you handle that kid. And they'll go, I have a story of a guy who dealt with this kid in a military school. And this kid, he kept telling this kid, don't. The kid got worse. Then he pulled the kid aside and said, look, I'm exhausted from doing this job. And he told a story. And what happened the next day? The kid stopped the behavior. And he goes, I don't know why it stopped. I go, because you told him a story.
Yeah.
You're already doing it. So
That's
you
amazing.
teachers out there are doing this. You don't know it. Let me teach you how the mind and brain works. And then I'll get out of your way. And then you go, hey, I got this. If I had to teach you something you've never done before, it'll be 8 months before you get good at this. Because you're already doing it, I teach you the mind and brain. Your behavior, your ability changes overnight. It's instant. That's why you call it instant impact. You learn how the mind and brain works, and you instantly are able to start getting energy at work.
Right. Amazing. And to, take things to a particular place, and let's say in India, because I'm sitting here in India, most of the teachers, if not all, they just go through the, teacher training, a very traditional training, which is like from the, the British legacy that we have, that kind of program, just once in their lives at the beginning. Then, they just go for the next 30, 40 years they essentially become very cynical at the end of it. And I mean, it's not helping the cause of even the teachers, not the students. So how does a person, or let's say a catalyst like you, can change things in India? If somebody from, Indian school is looking at you and they're thinking like, let's begin with this. How do you, change things around in a country like India?
Well, our program is online. And so, it's virtual, it can do that. But let's go back to what you just said. India got its educational system from England. Yeah. And are you aware of what England decided like 3 years ago about their educational system? They are no longer going to measure like outcomes. They're no longer going to look at the kids and go, how much did you learn? Yeah. They said it makes the teachers data managers and it doesn't produce good citizens. And so England has gone away from this centuries-old way of teaching because they know it's hurting the kids and hurting the teachers. Yeah. They're still searching for this. And I have a couple teachers I've helped that I had one teacher I helped. She was the only one, this is 2 years ago when the pandemic first started. She was the only one who was gaining energy up through December. Everybody else was crashing. And she was the only one who made it through the school year fine. Everybody else was getting sick and having issues like that. And that story's in our testimonial video and stuff. So the thing is that what you can do is you can do this online. We offered this instant impact course to just everybody. It's meant for teachers because I have a passion for teachers, but we offered it to everyone in 2020. And we had over 100 people from all walks of life take the course online and say they had their best year ever. And that's during a pandemic.
Wow.
So I will tell you that this course works for everybody. It's just
Yeah.
the teachers are the ones, it's meant for the teachers. It works for everybody. And it's online. Anybody can do it. And it steps you through as little assignments. Yeah.
Do you also plan to travel with it? Let's say you plan a tour of let's say 1 month, 2 months, come to a country, do physical sessions. Have you given it a thought?
I would love to do it when there's more demand for it. I would absolutely love to do it. I had a very, very close friend who died in April. His name was Swarp Roy. He's from India.
Okay.
And India was going to be the first country I was going to come to because he was using this to help adults. And when I was explaining to him how this would help, the kids and the teachers, he was really passionate. Especially, he was really passionate about my number one passion. So my number one passion is synaptic pruning. All of us went through this event around 13 years old. It's the biggest brain event we all go through. So if you think about preteen, they have your brain is made up of dendrites. It's a Greek word for tree, and your brain looks like a forest.
Okay.
And all these preteens have access to every tree in their brain. That's why they're so smart. You and I are not smarter than 11-year-olds. We're just not. We're not, okay? They have access to everything. At 13, they lose access to the trees they don't use most often. So if you imagine when they're using their brain as a kid, they're walking a path through the forest of their brain, and they're wearing a path. At 13, their brain chews away all the connections off the path and allows them to keep the connections on the path. Then puberty turns those paths into superhighways. So everybody thinks puberty is the issue. And again, that's not the answer. That's looking at a contextual fresh meat and citrus. The vitamin C is synaptic pruning. And then puberty supercharges it. So more than 100 years ago, the world was changed by teenagers. Because teenagers, they lived their life a certain way and then synaptically pruned, basically their car pruned down to their driver, and then puberty supercharged them and they were able to change the world. What we do now is we sink these kids in a hole, 10, 11, 12, and synaptically pruning brings them back up to normal. And then we go, they're fine. Well, we just lost this opportunity to have geniuses. Yeah. So I have a program that helps prepare these kids for synaptic pruning, 11, 12 years old. And it's one of the funniest things. And I love that. This is why I'd love to be in person doing this, because I'll love to walk into a class of like 12-year-olds and they'll be talking and the teacher will try to shut them up. And I'll say, let them talk, let them talk. And I'll say, hey, how many of you have a brother or sister who's older than you? And half the kids will raise their hand, but they're still talking. Yeah. And I'll say, what happened to them when they turned 13 or 14? And these kids are still talking. And one of them will say, my brother got sassy. My sister got in trouble. They'll say all this talk and did all stuff. Kids are still talking. I'll say, you know what happened to them? They lost part of their brain. And the same thing's going to happen to you next year. Every kid in the room. And I just look at the teacher like, I can shut these kids up. You don't have to, I got this. Don't worry about it. Every kid's like, what? I'm like, all of you are going to lose connections in your brain next year. And that's a good thing if you do it right. If you do this right, you will become a genius in your unique ability. If you don't do this right, problems with the law start at 14 years old across all cultures.
Substances, anything like, of course.
Every culture, because it's all synaptic pruning. That's a vitamin C for humans. It's all synaptic pruning. I like to help people prepare for that. When I coach people older than 13, what I'm really trying to do is bring their car back. Because you see, here's what synaptic pruning is. This kid is driving any car when they're 11, 12, 13. And at 13, they synaptically prune down to one car. And there's a 2% chance they're going to get the right car. There's only a 98% chance they're not going to get the right car. Wow. So what you have now is a kid who's trying to drive this car and it doesn't drive the way he wants. He turns the windshield wiper on and the radio gets louder. He turns this way and it goes that way. And puberty kicks in and now he's and that's why he's in trouble with the law and he's panicking. I will go into these classrooms, 14 and 15-year-olds old, And these kids are, they're at-risk kids. And I'll say this, it gets every one of their attention. I'll explain to them, when you were 11, 12, 13, what was life like? They're like, I had all the energy in the world. I was so smart. What happened? You're 13. I don't have energy. I feel depressed. I'm frustrated. I go, and I explain to them, you could drive any car. You now don't have the car you were meant for. Here's the thing. What I want to do with you guys this year, I take the whole year to do it. I go, it's 2 steps. Number 1, I want to help you drive your mismatched car safely. I'm going to show you how to drive. I know this isn't your car, but let me show you how to drive it safely so you're around for the second part. I'm going to get your car back. So even when I executive coach adults, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to help you drive your car safely because I know it's not your car. I know that. And then I'm going to help you get your car back. And that's what I do for people. But why? Imagine if we just did this with preteens. So that's where Swarup was like, John, because Swarup had a tremendous passion for India. I mean, you're a second most populated country. People are really intelligent. I love your school system because what you really do is you sort out the people who really, I'm going to say, need college. Engineers, doctors, I don't want to go to a doctor who hasn't gone to college. I don't want to go to an engineer or drive over a bridge to somebody who hasn't gone to college. But I'm going to tell you, college, you don't need college for the rest of these people because they should operate in their uniqueness. And you would have these poets, these geniuses, these philosophers, these politicians, these amazing leaders in their uniqueness if you help them understand who they were. So the point is if we for 10 years just helped like India have synaptically pruned the kids right, at the end of 10 years, you'd have these kids that would be inventing stuff. They'd be changing the world. Correct. And so that was kind of the thing. Like India, to me, I had a heart for it because of Swarup, and Swarup saw the value of it. And so that's kind of what he had connections. We were going to start talking to people about doing that. Like I said, unfortunately, he died in April. But yeah, so synaptic pruning would dissolve all the problems in the world. Every problem you see, the person and that person's problem started at 13 and 14 with how they synaptic, because they're not driving the car they're meant to drive.
Amazing. So just one last question to you. What's next for you? Because there are so many things that you're involved with. Your brain is constantly, pruning others. So tell us what's next for you.
Well, I'm going to continue to support Flowcess with all that. I'm going to try to get more into synaptic pruning, and to do that. Swarup and I had a newsletter we were ready to share. It was 52 editions. And so I'm working on that. I still want to it's the last thing you worked on. I want to get that out.
Right.
One thing I'm doing is if you're on LinkedIn, check out #BeyondLinked. I read this book called Linked. It was written 18 years ago. And it explains how everything is connected. Your body, how your body's connected, how the economy's connected, how politics, your government's connected, how social media and the internet's connected, how the world's connected. And the issue is that all the conversations we want to have, we can't really have because we don't have the language for it. And this guy wrote this book explaining how networks happen, but he didn't have the information I have. So when I read it recently, again, this book's been around 18 years. It's an amazing book. But when I read it, I applied my models to it. And now I've been sharing this with people. And now I'm doing a series on LinkedIn. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I do a real quick post, and I'm taking my time and I'm helping people learn this, because what's going to happen is in January, February, March, we're going to have very emotional conversations about the pandemic, about government, about everything. And if you don't understand the language, so if you think about it, if I were to say, this guy threw this ball and this guy swung a thing at the ball and this guy went and got the ball, and you'd go, but if I explained, the bowler and the batsman and you'd go, oh, you're talking about cricket. We are all talking the first way about everything. We don't even know it. When we talk about the economy, when we talk about life, we're talking about the guy with the guy with the guy. When you understand the positions, all of a sudden, when you start talking, you're like, I know exactly what's happening. I know exactly the effects. I know exactly this. So I am bringing this information to the book Linked, because I'm taking it beyond Linked. So if you just look at hashtag Beyond Link and you go back through, I am slowly bringing people up. There's going to be some math involved. I'm going to warn
Yeah.
you, but I'm bringing people up because I really believe if we get a language for how everything in the world actually works,
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're going to be able to dissolve issues and help issues get better a lot quicker. So that's
amazing.
really kind of my passion project right now on social media.
That's amazing. Mr. John Lenhart, thank you so much for your time. You've been amazing. You even gave a cricketing analogy for Indians to better understand things. So that's amazing. And as we, recently had a new education policy, which came out in 2020. So there is more space for influential people like you in our education system now. So I
Nice.
hope to see you soon in India and creating, real impact on ground. And just like you've been doing all your life. Thank you so much and all the best with all of your.
Thank you and good luck. Good luck with your show. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. And thank you, our audience. Please do tell us what do you think of this audience. Please comment and reach out to Mr. John Lenhart. If you're on LinkedIn, you can find him there and check out that hashtag. Thank you.